I don't know how they're gonna do it. I think they might do it first.
So I call the 31st meeting of the Madawaska School Committee to order. And Chris, I'll allow you to open your meeting.
I'll call the finance committee meeting to order as well.
And we'll stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's have a moment of silence. And adjustments to the agenda.
One adjustment, and it's a request to rescind a resignation. We can do that under new business items of information.
All right. Anybody here want to participate in any items on the agenda? Nobody here. And approval of the 30th meeting, April 26th. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Mindy moves. Do I have a second? Robert? Any discussion? All those in favor? And approval of the April financial statement. Do I have a motion to approve the financial statement? Robert moves. Do I have a second? Louis? Any questions, comments, discussion?
I sent an email. I don't know if anybody wants to continue conversations from that. From the April financial. Was questioning on the, posting of the workers' comp expenses. I'm wondering why we wait for the year end to post and pay workers' comp.
Usually get one invoice, and it's coded to so many accounts that it's just as easy to pay it in one lump sum. And then sometimes at the end of the year, we'll see if we have the full amount available, or if we need to put a little bit in the next year's budget, but this year should not be an issue.
Okay, so is it because our budget season and the workers' comp coverage periods don't match?
Yeah, they do match.
Okay.
They do, yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes we get a better estimate towards the end of the year. They give us an estimate for the year, and then based on our actual information, their actual salaries, they give us a revised.
Okay, so you do it true, yeah, okay.
But that being said, couldn't we do an average accrual for every month, just a ballpark number to put a placeholder?
You could.
One time a year?
You could, it's a lot of debting.
No, I'm not saying per
Oh,
call
just
center,
the one.
but just per month, if you got $120,000 policy premium for the year, put $10,000 a month for each month, so at least we've got something there.
Yeah.
That would be a plus. I think that's where you're going.
Yeah, it should be an easy accounting.
It is,
Place
well, it is,
separate.
but I have to report it by cost center. Right, I can't just do a one line.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
it's
can,
still possible.
it is possible, absolutely.
It's still possible, and you can still do it true once you have the audit from payroll. When you do your payroll audit for workers' comp,
It depends, it's usually part of the, it could be part of the audit, it could be part of the year.
so it's the suggestion going forward.
You had asked also how we're doing, how we're trending, and I know that we responded, we're trending down, but I looked back at 6-7 years, and we were at one time 2.72.
Yes.
Anytime we're above 2, we have to do those 15-20 page reports. And you linked it, you questioned if our new employee category, safety coordinator, if that had helped, and I'm in all sincerity say, yes, it has helped, because we have someone on our staff making sure that they're doing their safety training. So we've gone from 2.72 this year down to 1.14, so it's good in 5 years.
You're at a 1.14 a month.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a nice decrease.
Yeah.
So that's my only comment from the financials, if that's something that we look at going forward, I think it's just a true picture on the monthly report. When a monthly financial
All those in favor? And we move to budget workshop number 4.
So we didn't know if we finally wanted a presentation, just a brief overview, or just to answer questions, ask questions, and we like to answer, we weren't sure exactly.
Don't think, not everybody's been privy to any of the meetings, not everybody has been privy to them, so maybe a brief overview to start would be beneficial.
If you have the documents in front of you,
Yep.
so on the top right-hand side, there's letters.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is A, and that's a general overview, that's your budget by cost center. By law, I have to report and build the budget by cost center to report to the Department of Education. So each cost center, the first cost center is regular instruction, and that covers anything that happens in the classroom. So different levels, and I've got different reports that will dig down deeper. So for that cost center, we're looking at a very slight increase of less than $10,000. The second cost center is special education programs, so that's anything to do with educating and providing services to students with special needs or special services. And that cost center, we're looking to increase by about 11%. And some of that is due to a couple of additional ed techs that are needed. And one of the salaries that we also have local education funds, local entitlement funds, which is a grant. And there's a couple of salaries that some years we charge more to the grant and less to the budget. And this year we're looking to charge a little bit more to the budget because of the funding levels in the grant. The third cost center is your career and technical education. That is the cost for the CTE center, St. John Valley Tech Center. The St. John Valley Tech Center gets its own funding level, but in the event that they would need to have more, the additional would be assessed to the 3 districts that contribute to that center, or that are part of that center and the interlocal agreement. This year, there's no request for any additional funds. The fourth one is total other activities, so anything to do with sports or co-curricular clubs, such as your math team, your chess club, your drama, those kinds of teams. And we're looking to stay the course and have no increase in that cost center. The student and staff support is anything to do with guidance, library, teacher professional development. It also has your nursing services, your informational technology, so your instructional support, and assessments, so your student assessments, such as to gauge where they're at. That cost center has a very slight increase of less than $10,000 as well. And the majority of that is due to our teachers this year taking more courses. System administration is the superintendent and superintendent's office. And that cost center is actually a very slight decrease. We're keeping that level. School administration is anything to do with the school offices. A slight increase in that, about 9%. And the increase there is primarily due to a secretarial position at the elementary school. Part of one was half-time secretary, half-time library aide, and we're looking to make that full-time secretary. So the offsetting credit, there's an offsetting credit in the student staff support line, and we're increasing this line item a bit more. Student transportation is anything to do with busing. And the majority of the decrease there this year is due to not purchasing a bus through our regular budget. The facilities maintenance is anything to do with buildings and building upkeep and custodial. And we're having a slight increase in that line, primarily due to we have insurance, water and sewer. There's an increase in the utilities and in I'll have to dig a little further. It's the salary adjustments, health insurance, and heat, primarily utilities. The school lunch program is anything to do with nutrition services for breakfast and lunch and meal deliveries. And we have a slight increase there of about 3%. And that program this year, I've kept it pretty much at the same level because in the event that we need to deliver meals at home as well. If we go remote, we deliver meals with our buses, and if we don't, we're in school feeding them, so either way. And the continuing education program is anything to do with adult ed, or there's also the alternative ed program, and we're serving the credit recovery, those kinds of services, and that's a very slight increase of less than $1,000.
Lucy, just go back to school lunch program.
Yep.
Is any of that offset by some COVID funds that help with meal programs or state funding for meal programs?
The school lunch program,
So we capture the expenses here, but we'll see.
you'll see the revenues on the revenue side. There is no the only COVID funds are reimbursement of the meals that we deliver.
Yeah.
So it was based on a meal count,
Okay.
and it wasn't based on how much of expenses that we
Right.
actually incurred.
So you
It
still
didn't
have
track,
close expenses here, but you see some of it offset with
absolutely.
state funding or
Yeah,
wherever the funding
absolutely.
came from, whether it was COVID funding or state funding or.
So I'm pretty much keeping the same level of funding and or expenses for the school nutrition program because whether we're in school or remote, we end up doing meals. So there's not a whole lot of difference in our operation methods.
So, again, I'm not there to observe meal programs, but, so I see that we still, I think I hear this from kids, that we're still serving meals on disposable dishes. So is there opportunity to go back? I mean, that's a cost savings measure, if we go back to washing our own dishes versus disposable, or is that?
Right now, it's because of the COVID restrictions,
Okay, so
and that you
you're
can't
following-
take back something that someone else has touched.
You're following,
Yeah. It's
So
a
even-
mandate right now, we have no option.
So but it doesn't align with healthcare or going to a restaurant where,
Right.
all those.
They're
opportunities.
being stricter for schools anyway, so they want us to keep open.
Okay.
So,
But it goes against, what even nursing homes are doing or residential care, where
Yeah,
they're serving.
but what they've done is they've actually provided free meals for all students so
Okay.
that we get enough volume
Okay.
to offset the costs that
Okay.
are injured.
Okay, I mean, if you're following a state rule and you're getting reimbursement for it, even though it's not the most efficient way, you're still getting.
In a way, it's actually helping us because
Well,
right now we have a
yeah,
very.
Efficient, but maybe not cost savings, so.
Correct.
It's more efficient.
Right now, we're having a very difficult time recruiting subs and helpers in the nutrition program. We're almost at a critical. So disposable right now is helping us stay afloat in terms of staffing. So this year, we're,
On the continuing education there, isn't that shared by the two other schools also?
yes, yeah. So this is the costs that are borne strictly from the Madawaska. And we have the other cost for SAD 27 share is in their budget. In this, the shared services, so your director and a couple of staff members in the other office, only the portion that pertains to Madawaska is in this budget. So it's they pay about a third of the salaries, and SAD 27 pays 2/3 of the salaries to run the program between the two sites.
So you're looking at almost a $500,000 program?
It is, but it's also serving some of our high school kids, not just adult kids, not just the adult education program. We're putting it in that cost center because we get a better subsidy, and it actually brings in additional funds to our funding stream
Okay, on the revenue side.
on the revenue side.
Okay, now.
We're maximizing all the lines that we can to get the most subsidy, and continuing education is one of those lines that we can increase subsidy, so we use it.
Back to the bus situation?
Yep.
Is there any particular reason why we're not buying the bus this year? Because if we delay one more year, then next year we're maybe stuck with 2 buses instead of only 1. I thought there was a rotational for the buses every year to cover that.
We're in good shape, Gary, this year because we were able to purchase an extra bus through the COVID funds.
Okay.
So we actually got 2 this year. And we have a plan for the buses. We have to rotate them every 125,000 miles or 10 years. So we can't buy all buses at one time, because we're gonna have to replace them
No,
all.
that's why I'm asking that question then.
We're gonna skip 2 years, that's what we're planning right now. We're hoping to.
Because we have a total of how many buses?
We use 4 daily, we have 2 spares, actually 3 spares, one is iffy.
So if
We
you
had to
want,
take 2 off the road recently,
so if you wanna run 10 years, you gotta have a bus every 2 years, buy a new bus every 2 years.
almost.
No,
It all depends on, some buses get used more than others, for example, our handicap bus. If
Right.
that one goes down and we need a handicap bus, we will have to purchase one next year. We're hoping that one will hang on, but it's one of our oldest ones. Right now, we're lucky, we don't have the need for it. But we've kept that handicap bus and we're
or you don't
hoping,
use it right now because you don't have,
using it as a spare.
One way to get around having that big chunk in a year is to create a reserve. And the carry forward to go towards specifically for purchasing buses.
yeah, so other than that, every 2 years.
That way you're not, you don't have that funding for 1 year, you get reimbursed, and the next you don't. It prevents that up and down.
We're gonna save for the next one.
Okay, so that's, total budget, so we're looking at a very slight increase of 1.6%, so 127,000 on the total expense side of the budget.
But that does not include anything from the district administration, is that what you said?
No,
Or
that
that's
does
included in this
that
one?
does include,
Okay.
there's, the district administration is a line in the system administration piece, and the Valley Unified Administrators. It actually had no increase to your budget this year. We were able to cover any extra costs. The next one that we look at, B and C are just diving down a little deeper. It just gives you a little more information by cost line, but the green lines on each sheet tie back to each cost center. So if we go to D, D is a summary by categories of expenses. So in the entire budget, you see a line for total salaries. So in this current budget, or proposed budget, we're showing an increase of 4.7% in salaries, which includes salary increases, enough in there so that we can negotiate fairly. By law, we have to have, you can't decide not to give an increase until you've actually negotiated. And we're currently negotiating with the support staff. The health insurance, the cost of health insurance to Madawaska this year was actually a 4.08% increase. In the budget, we actually have only a 2.9% increase of health insurance costs in our budget. Salary benefits is all your FICA, your retirement, your workers' comp, your unemployment. There's a 3.6% increase.
So I want to go back to health insurance. So is that because you're budgeting fewer plans?
Fewer plans or,
Or the mix of plans, so.
Right. Yeah, as an employee leaves, that person may have had health and the new person doesn't. Every year I take a snapshot in time and say who's covered right now.
Yeah.
And I have to allocate a few extra in the event that we end up hiring or there's staff movement throughout the year. And we need to offer it to someone who currently didn't have it. A life-changing event allows them to, even though they don't elect for it in July, they may elect for it in September if there's a divorce or a baby or whatever. So I have to have flexibility to be able to offer it throughout the year.
Then going back to teacher salary, the total salaries, the teachers have a 2.1% increase, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and approximately annualized, that comes to 71,000.
Yeah, 1 step plus 100%. The VU EFC assessment is where the system administration increase is, and that's a slight decrease of just under $100. Professional contracts and leasing services, it's actually a decrease of about 20%. Travel, professional room and board, a decrease of $1,500, that's the minimal part of the budget anyways. Utilities, That line includes your insurance, your water and sewer, your electrical, slight increase of 4%. Fuel, diesel oil, and propane, a slight increase of just under 6%.
On the cogen burner that we have here, is that included in that?
Yes, yeah. That would be in,
Is there a big increase in that and buying the supply?
There's an increase in the heating oil.
No,
That
well-
is, I know, that is the backup for
Right.
the biomass.
Biomass, that's right.
Right, but the contract for the biomass has not increased tremendously, if at all.
Right.
the price may not have, but the usage may. So I have to allow that we may
I
have
understand
some usage. Repayment of loans and leases, the increase there, we now have a vestibule loan for the school revolving renovation loan, so the first payment will be next year. Capital renewal and borrowing, that is the biomass loan. Materials and supplies,
How
there's
many more
an
years on that, Lucy?
2029, I believe, is when we end.
How come we have an increase in the biomass? Wasn't that a set rate for 20 years or something like that? If that's the biomass one?
It may be part of the interest. I don't know, just looking at this sheet,
I understand that, but you know, you've got an increase there, but,
of $600.
yeah, well, it should be going down instead of up, if they're paying that off. Like a loan,
Maybe.
you know, as the loan goes down, you're supposed to have to pay less interest or whatever. So why an increase?
I had to look at it. I dealt with this a while ago, so.
Yeah.
Materials and supplies, the increase there is primarily due to software that we purchased through our special ed program. What we've recognized this year is when you're dealing with remote learning versus in-person learning, this particular group of kids really needs to be addressed differently than others. So we're really investing in their the access and the type of materials that they're using. We also have library books and supplies in that line. Total equipment and furniture, we're actually not investing in that. A lot of the equipment and furniture we were able to buy using Easter funds or the grants. So we're not increasing our request through the budget. Instructional software is software used in the classrooms. Meals, lodging, and transportation, that's reimbursing of staff travel. So that's $300, not much. Dues, miscellaneous, and transportation, a decrease. Student contracted services at the same level.
Meals, lodging, and transportation, we're able to save there because the teachers are using our vehicles. What's it on travel? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the conferences and
Everything is Zoom now.
everything is Zoom, so, they're charging you dues, but they're not, we don't have to go and stay in Augusta overnight. Student contracted services, so that's part of the special ed, services, so that's staying the same. Career and technical education, so if we had that extra cost for the St. John Valley Tech Center, this is where it would show. Equipment repair and maintenance, a slight decrease there of about 18%. Repair and maintenance to the building, decrease of about $4,400. We have a contingency in the event that a large piece of equipment, such as a biomass boiler, would go down. Conference, workshops, and professional development, that section, the increase there is primarily due to tuition reimbursement to teachers. Courses that they take. Food supplies and nutrition kept at the same level, and the last one is a decrease of 90 for not purchasing a bus in this year. So that summarizes by category the increase to our budget.
So on the first paper we went over, on the paper that has A, the total student transportation was reduced by 89,157, but on this budget, it's a reduction of 90,000 G's and
The 90
So
is
is that-
strictly for the bus, and the other, the 89 may include different areas in the student transportation. There's all kinds of costs. There's your salaries, your benefits, your maintenance of your vehicles and not, whereas the 90,000 is specific just to the bus purchase, the equipment. for the vehicle.
But that's what it's written for on the paper, on the A sheet, it says no bus purchase this year, that was the explanation why it went down to
That's your
89.
primary,
Yeah, that's primary.
that's primary reason. If you want to look at C, towards the back, the last page, not the last page, but the next to last page, on C,
Line item what?
line number starts at 953 on the left-hand side.
53 or 60?
953,
Okay, yeah.
okay?
No transportation.
So the salaries in transportation are a slight increase of $1,500. The health insurance is a decrease of $82.70. The salary benefits are a slight increase of $67.30. Professional and leasing services, $4. Utilities, $855. And if you eliminate the bus, all of those things together add up to the $157.
What are salary benefits?
Salary benefits, that's your FICA, your social security,
Oh,
your
okay.
retirement, your
Alright.
workers' comp,
Yep.
your unemployment.
Do you have the annual number for workers' comp? I know you do the mod rates,
I
but.
don't know off the top of my head. Okay, so the next sheet we'll look at is the E for all the funding and the revenues. So once I've built the expense side of the budget, then we look to see where's the revenues need to come from. What kind of sources of revenues are coming in to offset all of these costs? So from the top to the bottom, we look at the carry forward, and the school lunch and continuing ed are run as separate little entities within our budget, so I have to keep the carry forward separate in each of those categories. So the general budget, we're using almost 375,000 to offset this current year, but this proposed budget. School lunch, almost 44,000, and continuing ed, almost 11,000. The local revenue section, the one with the red arrow, that's the Eps Local Allocation. So the funding that comes from the state of Maine, a portion of that funding is required local, and the state requires that the towns raise a minimum of that amount of money to get the amount of state funding that they're allocating. So if the towns were to say, no, we're not raising 2.5 million, we're gonna raise 1 million, the state would actually decrease their share as well, and we would not get their share of the state allocation. So this is what they call the minimum required local. The additional local funds is in blue. That's the last line that I fill in. So I identify all sources of potential revenue in my budget before I determine, excuse me, the amount of local funds that we would need, the additional local funds that we would need to get from the town. The school nutrition program, I'm keeping that at the same level as last year. I think we can keep operating the way we've been doing. So local,
Will we free lunch again next year?
we don't know. So in the budget I have as if they eliminate the free lunches, then the parents would have to start contributing again. And if that happens, then we would likely have to tap into some local funds from the towns. So the nutrition, so 60,000 towards nutrition and 68,000 towards the continuing education program. So total local taxes would be 3,764,000, so same amount as current year. We're not asking any additional funds from locals. Then to identify all the tuition and fees. So based on the students that are being tuitioned from other towns, from Grand Isle and from the unorganized territories, we expect a total tuition and fees of $398,000. And what we use there is we charge a certain rate that is established by the state of Maine in terms of tuition fees. And then whatever is negotiated by Grand Isle to contribute towards their students.
So why do you have two levels of tuition for Grand Isle, some at 10,000, some at 12,000?
Yeah, one is elementary and one is secondary. There's two different rates for different levels of students.
So you have a total of
No, I get 10,335 per elementary student.
Right.
So grade K to 8, and grades 9 to 12 are contributed at 12,279. That's our estimate, that's the rate that is established at December 2020. We actually charge the rate that's established in December of that current year. So in December 2021, I'll get the new rate, which doesn't fluctuate by much,
Right. Well, yeah, a total, Grand Isle has a total of 32 students.
Approximately
Right.
32.
Yeah.
It varies from 28
Yeah.
to 32.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the students that we had early spring. Other local funds, so your food service, so these are revenues from parents or sales, that's what historically we've been able to gather. Sales in general, so if we are able to rent out our buildings, we gather revenue from there as well. However, this current year, we shut our buildings down to outside sources, that's why we're, we hope to be able to open it up again, but we'll see. The tri-district amount, currently, our bookkeeper in Madawaska is also doing the payroll in SAD 33, and we're charging SAD 33 for her time, so this is the revenue to offset it. Next year, we're hoping to hire a bookkeeper in SAD 33 so that this person would not, the bookkeeper in Madawaska would be able to concentrate more on the Madawaska side. And E-rate, we contract network services, and we are able to apply for a portion of reimbursement through E-rate, which is a federal fund. So the total cost of the contract is in the budget, but these are the offsetting revenues that we anticipate from E-rate. And then the bottom portion is the state revenue. So the first red arrow is the funding allocation through the state ED 279 report, which is our funding model. So when I mentioned above below that if you don't spend the required local, you don't get the state funding, this is the state funding. You could, they would reduce this 2,929,000 if you don't raise the full local amount.
But we're 1.1 million over what the state requires for those minimums to get that match, correct? We're asking the taxpayers for 1.1 million more than the state required minimum right now. Okay.
Yeah.
The regionalization, the second red arrow that's the funding that we're getting because we created the VUESC. Because we're part of an education service center, they're actually giving us an additional almost 19,000. Additional education subsidy is subsidy that we get specifically for our continuing education program.
Back to that, regional assistance, is there a timeline for that? Is that ongoing?
As
well, I mean, if funding
As
changes
long
over
as they
time.
give us money.
Yeah, and if funding changes,
They
but there
never-
was no announcement of this is good for 5 years. It
No.
was just, okay.
It's just
Yeah, subject to
until they change
but-
the law, I think.
Subject to change, but
Yeah.
no announcement.
The lunch subsidy and the lunch subsidy summer program, those are, the typical lunch subsidy is what we normally get, the 135,000. The lunch subsidy summer program, that's the extension due to the COVID. So they call it the summer program extension because it typically happens mostly in the summer, where they say you can deliver to all students in the summer, or all kids in the summer, ages 0 to 18. Normally, that's not what they allow, but during COVID, they've allowed it. And we have an extension till this December?
Yeah.
September to today. So as a whole, I've kept the nutrition program pretty much whole. So whatever happened this current year, I'm anticipating will happen next year, because we really don't know. It's a pure guess, and we've been able to do what we need to do this year.
And we see, those students don't need to be enrolled with us, right? So homeschool students can still get.
Homeschool, anybody at home. So if they can eat solid food, they can get served. Yeah. Medicaid reimbursement is programmed through it's the services that we provide to special need kids through the IEP. There's a certain programs that once they're registered, I think the PT, some of those services, we can get reimbursed through main care. It generates some revenue.
That's based on student population receiving those services. So
It's specific to specific program, specific services and specific students. They have to be identified. So we've identified the total receipts needed. By law, I have to make sure that we've identified where's the money gonna come from to support the budget. You can't plan to go into a budget, with a negative amount. You have to be able to show that the funds will be generated, so. And if we, yeah,
Chris, so all we had asked about the blue, the over EPS.
Yes.
I had done a study a couple years ago, and I just found it. This is the 2018-2019 school year, and we had found every school district in the state of Maine and how much percentage over their EPS. At that time, there was only 4 districts that had gone under, what they were required. 21 schools had stayed exactly at EPS, and then the remainder of districts all had gone, over at an average of 33% over. So I think our percentage is really low. I don't know if you have.
We're about,
So whenever we're talking about school funding and you mentioned EPS, it's always, it's the bare bottom. It's the bare minimum, and it's almost a running joke with, you know, school finance that we can operate that way, with what they're saying, you know, the minimum is. So I just wanted to share that with you.
and then the last sheet is mill. Self-explanatory. Right inside. And that shows what the increase is to local, so we're looking at $0 increase to the local. And when you apply that amount of contribution to this current year valuation, it's actually a decrease in the mill rate. So it's almost a 3/4 point decrease in the mill rate.
Take up questions. On that sheet D, under the repayment of loans and leases, you talked about a vestibule loan that we have. But we were also provided a document from the COVID relief money that was given out. There's 2 allocations for vestibule money in there. Can you tell me why? One, we're saying we have a loan, and one saying we use that money?
So the school revolving loan fund that we originally made in 2019 was delayed because of COVID. It's $110,000. The state will cover approximately 50% of that, and the other 50,000 was for us to cover through 5 years. Because of the delay, the cost has gone up. The engineers have estimated the cost has gone up by 35 to 50,000. So the 2 amounts that you see in the ESSER funds, one is for the one we completed here at the high school. That was not part of the grant. The other one is for the $50,000 anticipated increase at the elementary school project.
Can it be delayed to a future date because of, the high cost of, building materials now and then refiguring it out down the road,
With
or?
the grant that we, well, for all of the grants, there are deadlines, but for the revolving loan fund, we had to, actually, we should have finished it by June. We have an extension to go till August. We hope to finish it. We had our pre-bid meeting today. 2 contractors showed up. So no, we can't delay it. Or we
Can't delay if you want it done.
or we
If you
lose,
want grant money.
we lose the
Now, if
funding.
you don't have grant money, you build it, and you build out of your own spec.
You can, but it's gonna cost you twice as much. Right now, we're getting a $50,000 loan at 0%. And we're getting 50,000, I'm averaging,
Yeah.
50,000 from the state. So you're not gonna get a 0% loan around here for 50,000.
No.
Was the grant based on a quote that you submitted?
Yes, the grant was based on
Is
quotes.
that, and the quote was based on a prior time, so materials have changed now. If we overshoot this project, as far as expenses?
It's okay if we can cover those expenses, and that's why we put in the next COVID grant an additional 50,000, so that we can complete the project. No more questions?
Well, this is a very complicated budget to sit here and understand it.
It is very
It's absolutely get on the line. So that's why I'm asking questions, not because I'm challenging, I'm trying to
We
understand.
understand that.
So on the equipment and furniture, on that sheet D, you had mentioned laptops or something, or I can't remember exactly what it was.
Sheet D, yeah.
I'm just wondering on the COVID relief money, because there's a considerable amount of money, right?
Yeah.
And there's a, on the bottom, there's an anticipated, that looks to me like there's an anticipated almost $1 million still yet to come to us, is that what that means?
Yes.
So how can that be applied, or is there a way for that to be applied to reduce the amount of funding that the town is liable for? Or what have we done thus far to impact the dollar for the taxpayer? What?
So we've got really creative with a lot of those funds, and you probably went through, where you saw new windows at the elementary
Yeah.
school, and we have projects to, like this rug here is one future project that replaces the floor, those kind of things, and we can do that because we can justify that we need windows open that are functioning in order for kids to breathe fresh air, so that's part of the COVID, it fits under that umbrella. It's hard to sanitize rugs, it'll trap in, diseases as a floor, you can clean it, so we can get really creative. Those things are gonna help Madawaska School Department in the long haul, because you're not gonna have to get loans to repay these things and do that because of the COVID fund. We bought a bus, we have bought all the teachers a new laptop, so when we usually lease our laptops, the teacher laptops are part of that lease. In here, are the student devices, which we don't have enough grant money to cover. We lease for 4 years or 5 years? 4 years, I think is our. So that is in there, but the teachers, they're all paid for and done, and that was done through the grant funds. So things like that, we were able to, you might not see an immediate impact in this budget, but these projects that have been done are gonna help you in the long run, because you're not gonna have to fund them locally.
The other thing too, the funds are very specific to COVID, so unless you can specifically tie it to COVID, you can't really target to those funds, the requirements are very strict. The other thing that the Department of Ed has repeatedly cautioned us on is, don't take something out of what you normally fund in your budget and cover it through Easter funds, because that will affect your future funding that comes from the state. So the part of the state funding formula includes things that are based on prior expense levels. So if you take something out of the expense level and fund it elsewhere, next year's funding will be less. And the grants will have expired, and now you have less funding to cover what you need to cover in your regular budget. So our regular budget is set up so that we're not gonna lose funds based on expenses. We always keep in mind, what are our funding levels and what do we need to maintain so that we don't suffer in the future.
This next round, Chris, that you mentioned, the ESER 3 that we haven't got yet, almost
Yeah.
$1 million, also comes with a requirement that 20% of that allocation has to be used for learning loss. So it has to be used for after-school tutoring, summer school projects, all those type of things to recapture learning. So we're even looking at some interventionist positions, so we're gonna be funding a couple of interventionists, and we can fund it for 3 years in a row. So we don't wanna use up that money all this year or next year, we wanna kind of drag it out for a couple of years so we get the benefit of it. So that's gonna help, year after year.
The other benefit that we may not speak of is that we're helping the local economy. Those windows came from a local hardware store. The parent pickup driveway at the elementary school came from a local contractor. So as much as possible, we're pouring it back locally.
Did good things with it. How much were the windows for?
About 85,000.
That's just the windows without the labor.
Not installed.
The driveway for the parent pickup was 110,000 or somewhere around there.
So when we talk about health insurance is up, salaries up, and you talk about ESSER funds that are coming in for projects themselves, is there anything else in this budget that you can highlight that are COVID expenses related that, are not covered by funding, but something that we have to absorb within our operations? Is there anything there
The only thing
that you can
that,
think of that is an increased expense to?
well, the only thing that comes to mind for me is that unfunded mandate of the COVID relief states. So sick days that we were mandated to provide in the event that someone was exposed, had to be quarantined, had to, the daycare was closed and they couldn't work, therefore they had to be home. Those days were required to be provided to the person, but were never funded by anywhere else. And we couldn't put them in the CRF funds. That's really the big ticket item. Everything else, the PPE that we purchased, any material that we could tie to COVID, we put to the funds.
I'm just gonna dovetail off that.
Yeah.
And then bring in the school nurse topic again. So that first round was covered under the ESSER funds, but, you know, the 21-22 school year, where is that funding from? The first one we funded under CARES 1, and the second one we're funding under ESSER 2. So it's not on an operational.
No, the salaries that were funded from the first grant, there's none that were added to the budget.
So what's gonna happen to that position after the money dries up?
The employees know that it's a year-by-year position. So if the funding dries up.
So we're not obligated to hire them the year that we don't have any funding for them?
By the time you get to the end of the funding, nurse should have moved to retirement.
The other thing that we've been cautious about is when you're funding a position through the regular budget, the benefits portion, your FICA, your social security, your retirement, are actually a lower level than if you're funding it with federal funds. The federal funds retirement is actually like 15% higher. So you're getting less bang for the buck if you put salaries into your federal funds. So we're better off covering them through local salaries. So keep our local, the people that we're employing normally,
Right.
keep them in our regular budget so that we can maximize the use of the grant funds.
Is there any capital improvements that need to be done in the next couple of years that's gonna require a lot of funding that? Right now, we're right at tax level right now, 0 tax increase or a slight decrease, but is there something coming down the pipeline in the next year or two that's gonna create a 1 or 2 mil increase in loan funding that,
Well, I don't know what the increase will be, but we're due to have a construction committee meeting. I'm looking at these lights. We're looking at the lights in the hallways. We're looking at projects that we would like to get done and spread that out over time. Paul, are there other big projects? We've been able to cover some good ones. There might be roofs,
Yeah,
sections of the roof
we're
here.
gonna have to start looking at roofs and, all the way forward, especially the elementary school. That'll be a big one.
didn't this roof here get replaced here about 8 or 10 years ago?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that was before my time, but I don't think it got replaced. The last roof that we replaced was the one on top of the gym at the elementary.
Okay.
And that was insurance.
Yes.
That was only a couple of years ago.
Last year.
But as far as capital improvements, I mean, $1 million improvements, there's nothing to be done.
So you set any money aside for capital in your cash management plan on the balance sheet, where do you set aside for capital?
In order to set money aside, we have to create a reserve fund, and we can put something in our warrants this year. We plan on putting one for the bus and possibly one for Patrick.
I think we also have to put some into the unfunded liability, which we've been trying to build in the past couple of years.
Have we not been putting money every year into that?
We didn't last year.
The recommendation was 40,000?
No, well, 40,000 per year if we can.
Yeah.
We need to reach just under 400,000 at some point.
Is there any way to ask Ken, if he has any questions, Ken? I know, it looks like he's on with us, I don't know if.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know if Ken, if you can hear us, if you have any questions for us?
You're on mute if
You'd have to mute, yeah, you'd have to unmute yourself.
Do you have any, Yeah, I look at the front parking lot here across the street. That's, just about a total demolishment there. You walk on there, and you're gonna break a leg or something by somebody. Is there any looking into resurfacing that anytime soon? I mean, I see a lot of work to be done, but, nothing is being talked about as far as trying to generate funding for that at one point or another.
That parking lot and the one up above the school has typically been under the town's, costs.
Yeah.
In the past. It's all the same wallet.
Yeah,
So
I understand it's all the same.
when our capital improvement committee meets, if we put that in there, you'll see an increase in a future budget.
Does your capital improvement committee include anybody from the town, or is it just the school personnel?
It's usually just a school committee, facilities, and sometimes the principals.
Has it been discussed with the town at this point for that?
No, not at this point.
Why not? I mean, it's a safety hazard for the teachers and the public that come in here for all our meetings.
The school has paid several thousand, I think, last year to take care of the driveway here in front. We can only do so much every year.
I know, I understand that, but the question I'm asking, if you don't ask the town to do some of the work, then they don't know about it, and then you don't get the help that you need, and then all of a sudden.
We work really well with the town.
Yes.
I am, and Paul is in constant communication with Kevin. And I'm sure that if Paul has a hole that needs to be filled, he'll call Kevin and get some hot patch or cold patch, whatever it's called. So yes, we do take care of those things that are dangerous are taken care of as soon as we know that they are done.
I believe there are a few bills on the floor of the legislature specific for capital improvement projects for rural areas. So I think we might be seeing some things coming through through Augusta pretty soon.
And
if they're approved.
the governor also announced that there would be more of the school revolving renovation fund. So that's another area that Madawaska can look.
So a common question that I hear from a lot of people in the community is why do we have two schools? And what would be the cost savings if we consolidated two schools? Is there anything you can shed light on with that?
About 5, 6 years ago, Lester Willett and I went to Van Buren to visit that school. And we spoke with Clayton Belanger, who was superintendent when that school was downsized into one building. That school, first of all, was a lot newer than our facility here, but in that facility, he spent somewhere above, I don't know if it was 1.2 million, and it's been close to 20 years, I think, that they've done it, but everything had to be adapted for young children because it was a secondary school to begin with. So it was quite an expense. We, at the time, were headed toward the grant application. So that's been we even got an engineer to come in and look at our building, but that was kind of put aside while we were dealing with the pilot school grants. In order to do that, you're talking big bucks. You're talking taking one school and moving the children. The students here will not fit at the elementary school. The elementary school is our newest, most modern building. So do you want to take students out of a building, excuse me, that we have been investing in and move them to a building that's not fit for young children? So those are the things we face.
And you have a dollar amount from that. Maybe I remember incorrectly, but I remember that scenario happening, you had an engineer, and I remember seeing a dollar amount of retrofitting the school.
Oh, it was well over a few million, but
Yeah, you had a dollar amount.
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not saying you pulled up right now, but I remember.
No, yeah, we, and when we had the State Department examine our school, there were some pretty strong comments coming from the State Department too, at the cost of renovating a school building to make it a K through 12.
We visited all 6 schools in the area, and the only school the department was excited about was your elementary school. They're like, this is a nice school, you guys have, you're not one of the nicest schools in the county.
But but you're right in asking, we're still faced with the same problem
Yeah,
that started the whole thing, is
Yeah.
declining enrollment.
And I think that's some of the concern that I hear is, what are we gonna do now? You know, we don't, you know, the consolidation and the regionalization obviously is not going to happen. So what is the plan going forward? What's that gonna do to our budget in 4 years from now, or 5 years from now? And is there any consideration given to that today? So we're not faced with, oh God, here we need 14 million to renovate the high school in 5 years from now. Because I remember sitting on the site selection committee, we looked at some numbers, and it's a significant amount of money to bring this school up to where we really should be. And we're not talking 2 million, it's a lot of money. And I think a lot of people have that information and are curious as to what we're gonna do going forward. So although not relative to the exact budget we're looking at, it's just a general question that,
Always a difficult balance when you know you probably should be raising a budget a little bit every year in order to do some of these capital improvement projects or put money aside for it. But when you have a community that, at this time, who have said, don't raise our taxes, it becomes a real balancing act, you know, you have to, do we fix that hot top, or do we pass a budget that has a slight decrease in how the real, and we talk about that with our board and, you know, what's best, and, you know, we were able this year, in this budget, to get a few things done. We hope to, at the end of this school year, do a few lighting things, you know, on the carry forward, so that we don't have to put it in next year's budget. So we're happy that we're able to chip away at things a little bit.
So, you plan on putting money into reserve accounts? You did mention one with 40,000 plus a capital one, so that is the plan.
We are expected to get, if the governor just announced a 55% budget for education. If that gets passed
For this same school year?
for this same school year, we're gonna get an additional state subsidy that we will probably look to put in the reserve account.
It's supposed to fund at 55%, and what would you guess the funding would be?
We'll figure that out next week.
Okay.
With some-
We're currently at about 50%.
And this year, what's your, I'm gonna say that's your, unexpended fund? You know, do you have, you know, what you didn't spend, you thought you were gonna spend last year, but you didn't spend this year, you know, your surplus fund? Do you have an amount that you
Very
have
well
up to
at
now?
spending that.
Blame it on-
Yeah, I don't have a figure for you because we're still trying to address last minute projects. We have enough to cover what's in this budget, and, we're tackling at least 2 or 3 projects. So if we can tackle more before the end of June, we'll do it. It probably won't be your paving, because there's, you know, we have a priority list of things, and Paul has his things that he puts in order, but that's,
so the school does have a reserve account.
you can't go into July 1 with 0 in your bank account, because you still have salaries to pay and payroll, you have your summer salaries,
Yep.
and your state funds don't come in until the end of the month. So you can never have 0 in your bank account.
So is there a minimum recommended balance that you would have to maintain in an account
You
like
should
that?
maintain at least 2 months' worth of salaries, so that in the event, because we have had a curtailment from the state before.
Yep.
And if you ever run into, you have to either go for a loan, or you have to go to the local to raise more money. You don't want to put yourself in that position.
Well, right.
Would be two payrolls, what would that be?
It depends on which district, I don't know off the top of my head. It's,
So would you be able to share with us what that 2 months of coverage would be and what we are currently at? Would you be able to share that with us?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't deal with those numbers every day.
I think that's gonna be crucial for us to really get a good understanding where we are. I can tell you based on the town side of the budget, we've dealt with all these same issues.
Yeah,
All the same issues with no reserve accounts anywhere.
Yep.
Trying to put money away and maintain the services that we have at the same levels, and it's not easy. It's really not.
It's not, 'cause there's, like you said, there's always capital projects that
There's-
need to be done.
Yeah.
And in order to get to your workers' comp level that's a 1.1, you don't leave these safety issues untouched. You have to fix what needs to be touched. You're in a public building.
Yeah.
And your requirements to be in a public building, the standards are this high. When you're home, the standards are this low. We have to do this, the standard of safety that's higher, or we get dinged for it. And it shows up in absences and injuries and workers' comp.
I'm well aware of those ways.
Yeah. It's a constant battle. It's crazy.
So $11 million mentioned in an email, just special education only because, you know, it's a big dollar amount, $103,000, you know. It's just a breakdown of where that comes from.
The special education piece is really, that's one of the parts of the budget that we will hardly ever see a decrease, because by law, we have to have maintenance of effort. And in very simple terms, maintenance of effort says, if you're spending $10,000 per child that has special needs, you have to keep spending at least $10,000 per year per child. You can never decrease that amount. The only way that special ed would decrease is if you have a decrease in number of students that receive services. So the maintenance of effort piece is important, because if you don't maintain it, then they will take away your federal funds that are linked to special ed. So your Title I and your local entitlement, those funding levels will decrease.
So,
But at what point do you start reducing that? Because if you don't have students for it, then you become
We have
part-time.
not had, I don't think we have any reduction of students in special ed. There's
Are we
no
been-
recent increase.
it's increasing,
There's more diagnostics, there's more services being provided, even the state is sending more things our way because they're struggling with their services that they provide at their level. They're sending them to the school level, so the chances of us getting, but that's one of the areas that also is based on expenses. Remember I mentioned that if you lower your expenses, you get lower funds, that special ed is one of those areas. That if you spend less and you, don't meet maintenance of effort, you lose your federal funds, or that's one line in the funding formula as well, that if you spend less per child, you also get less in your funding formula.
so based off of an increase of 133,000 on this particular line item, what is the cost per child for that increase on this budget? Is it,
I don't know.
since it's gonna be something that, like you say, if you have to raise it, you can't go back below that, it's more than likely you sustain that. So at that 133, that tells me that next year we have to keep that same level.
So how many students? do
So,
you teach at that?
right, what is the difference? What's driving that increase? I see on here you have ed techs, but are ed techs, and I'm just asking, what justifies the ed tech versus an instructor versus whatever it may be? What justifies that 133 for us?
You might have, and I'm just being hypothetical right now, but it's very common that you have an IEP meeting for a student. The determination is that student's going to have a one-on-one ed tech. And we can't turn around and say, no, that's a IEP determination, it's signed, sealed, delivered, and we have to be ready to incur those costs. So that's just one example of special ed, how things can fluctuate really quick. You can have a new student move into your district tomorrow that not only has physical disabilities, but has mental, emotional disabilities and has learning disabilities. And the cost for that child is going to be quite expensive because there's speech and OT and
Yeah.
so I guess the question that might help is the budget that we have here is taking care of the students that we have in our buildings right now. It's not necessarily taking care of the students we have now plus anticipating 5 more students that need special ed. So is this a reflection of who we have and who we're taking care of in our building right now?
Yes.
So how many students are that, is that?
22.41% of our student population is special education.
22%?
22.41, and it's up 2% from previous year.
And that is, I don't know what term to use, but I'm not gonna say anything, but that's on the educational side. Not on the
And that's why that has,
No, on the physical and the emotional side, that's on the.
no, it has
all
all.
of the above.
Yeah, it can be speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy.
Oh, really?
It can be a severely disabled child. It can be something as simple as a speech, not a speech, but a learning disability.
Right.
Special education encompasses a lot of these things, so that's why you're.
Ben knows that personally, so.
So to know that it's relating to who we have in the building right now, and kind of go off Chris's question, what is 133 makeup? Is it so from one year to the next, and we're taking care of the kids that we have in the building right now, does that equal 2 more ed techs that we had to add to our services, or how many more hours of PT, OT, speech services? I guess
There's
trying
a
to go
lot
back to
of,
his thought of what combination of services and, or additional staff were needed to make up that 130,000.
Exactly, and
That's kind of where.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm asking, is what's making us increase that 133,000?
in terms of there's a lot of movement in the special ed staffing, especially at the ed tech level. So you may have an ed tech that has a lot of experience and one that has less experience. So that could be a reason for a salary increase. If one of the less experienced leaves and you end up hiring, you always hire the best person for the position. If someone comes in with 30 years experience, that's the one you're gonna hire. Right? So, but that costs money. The other thing is we did do, we have a salary adjustment that we negotiated teacher salaries. We're in the process of negotiating the student support salaries as well. There's an adjustment in there that's reflected in that 130,000, right? So it's not just additional, it could be additional, it could be an adjustment of salaries. We're having a real difficult time recruiting ed techs right now. Actually, ed techs, food services, custodians, bus drivers.
How many positions do we have for it?
How many
Ed tech openings?
I think we have, we might have two right now. Possibly a third, but. Yeah, I know the answer at the time that I'm creating the budget, but when you're asking me tonight,
Yeah.
everything is muddled, because I looked at this, over the last 4 months. So if I don't have the answer for that one line item, that's the.
Can I come back to Robert's question a while ago? Our current funding at the state level, fiscal year 21 was 53.39. Fiscal year 22 will be 53.61.
But that's not
It
necessarily
doesn't,
referring to
correct.
that. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we're gonna go to 55%, but it means that it might go up.
There's two levels of percentages. There's one that the state contributes, right now they're looking to contribute 55%. Of the 55%, we get 53% of that 55%. So right now, if that's at 45%, we still get 53% of 45%. So the big number needs to increase, but our percent of that number doesn't necessarily increase.
And that is school finance 101.
I'd call it like 2.
If you look on your sheet, the very last sheet, 1342 is the number of lines that I have, and those are all summary lines in my spreadsheet. Right? In my detail report, my budget, I've got 166 pages of details.
Yeah.
Right? So if you don't want to know how many pencils I bought, it's in here. I didn't think you wanted that level.
You'd be surprised what we want.
I know, but I'm not copying 166 pages.
You don't even know it by heart.
I do not know it by heart.
You know,
Are you good?
it's like every budget, and every budget is the same.
Absolutely.
The biggest part of our budget is always salary and benefits.
Yeah.
You know, we cut the nickel and dime stuff, but we never seem to want to cut where the big dollars are at. And I understand the situation, but then again, we're in a declining economy, declining student population, declining everything, and
The majority of these people are homeowners in the community that shop at the stores.
Yeah.
They're giving back to the community too.
that's all
And-
relevant.
We have worked really hard in the past several years to limit the impact as much as possible. And the percentage on the taxpayer bill for education has consistently gone down. So it's a slow process, but it is coming down, the percentage for education.
At the local level, but on the state and federal level, it's gone up.
Possibly,
So
but
you've been able to acquire more funds at the state and federal level more than you have on the local level. But the amount of expenditure is still considerably getting higher every year.
But our mandate hasn't changed.
Right.
I understand.
Our business model doesn't change. We have to educate every child in the community. And when students leave, they don't all leave on one street, right? So your transportation costs don't change. They don't all leave in the same grade, so you can't reduce by a teacher. So our level of services doesn't decrease when you have a small change in enrollment,
Small thing, yes. I understand.
right? And if all grade 3 left, you could eliminate a teacher, but they don't. You get 1 or 2 per grade, and you just can't combine them.
Special ed is almost 23%.
And special ed, so just, and those tend to stay longer than 12th grade.
Remember,
So-
6, 8, 10 years ago when I started this, it was maybe 15%, 16%. So
I think a lot of families have really appreciated the value of the teacher this year. Being a homeschooled child was not easy. Imagine having that many children in your classroom. So we're trying really hard to keep the kids in school.
Yeah.
And this budget reflects that.
And the decrease to the mill rate.
Are we good?
Yes, I'm fine.
Adam, you must have 5 questions for him, come on.
Oh, he hasn't said a word, he
I
hasn't
had
said a
to
word.
pull it from you in school, pull it from you again. Come on,
I
Adam.
think he's been to 6 meetings, I've heard him say 2 words.
I'll tell you though, Adam is the kind of student who hears everything and he will remember and he's very observant. Processing, but he's got it.
So when you guys have questions tonight, call Adam.
So I don't think we're at a point right this moment to make a decision whether we would, recommend or not recommend the budget right now. I'd like to re-meet as a finance committee to just kind of clarify a few things. I think there's different thought processes, and rather than just jump ahead of put the cart before the horse, I'd like to get one more meeting in. We are meeting on the 18th with the town, side of it. And at the tail end of that meeting, I think we can have a discussion, on the school board side of it, and for the school budget side of it, and try to come up with an answer for you right at that moment.
I'm just gonna check the dates.
Yeah,
to
what are your
see.
deadlines?
I'm gonna look at the calendar here.
One thing I would recommend is, and this is, in my opinion, I think on the town side of things, we dig really deep. And I don't know if that's been something that's been happening over the past several years, but I think the finance committee that sits at the table today is much more intrigued and much more interested in really digging down to that, and not to cut, but to understand why things are where they are at. And given that this is a very complicated budget, I want to make sure that we do understand, and it's not, I would vote yes or no just because I don't understand something. And I want to make sure that, because I don't have all the members here, I'd like to make sure that we're all on the same page and that there aren't a simple question that could be answered that would change the way somebody may feel about this particular budget, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to make, in order for that to happen, we're gonna have to make a better commitment to connect those committees
Correct.
throughout the 4, because this is our 4th budget workshop. You know, if we're part of all 4, I think we've had those questions answered. So maybe moving forward, if we can align those dates really good and work those out, that'd be part of the battle.
Yeah, I know on the town side, I think we started, determining when we were gonna start meeting in January. Starting in February, we started connecting, as much as we could, and we reviewed each department, which I guess you could almost do it through cost center here. And I guess for me, and I'm starting to understand more about, reimbursement or, some monies that if you move one thing from one cost center to another, there's a better kickback from the state or wherever it may be. I guess that's how I understand it, but I think to be able to understand that and why things shift and why it would increase here and decrease there, to explain that a little bit more thorough would be significantly helpful for the entire finance committee.
And I just want to press upon the 3 of you, we serve 9 communities.
I know.
It's a you know, so.
I know.
One last question for me is, what's the difference between a SAD and a private school? As far as funding is concerned.
SAD.
Well, your SAD school, your 27 school, and then, here in Madawaska is private.
No,
No.
Well, it's a public school, but it's not a SAD. Why is it not a SAD versus
Because
Madawaska?
you have one community that you serve, the school department is Madawaska. So you only serve, you have a tuition community that sends their kids here tuition. An SAD has multiple communities. So
Okay.
33 is Frenchville, Senegal, and 27 it's Fort Kent, New Canada, St. Francis, St. John.
Okay, so you guys serve a lot more communities,
Yes, yeah,
not on a tuition basis, on a,
they're part of the.
okay.
Okay, Chris, the only thing I question is if you plan on making a June 8th referendum, you have to post your warrants no later than May 25th. Otherwise, you won't be able to make June 8th.
That won't be my problem.
But it will be my
So-
problem, because I need a budget by July 1, ideally.
So I understand that pressure, but what I can tell you is that if you want me to make a decision now and have to have a decision, I can almost assure you it's going to be a non-recommended discussion for you. What I would like to do is give the opportunity to meet as a finance committee and let's regroup and make sure that we clearly understand before we do that. That's where I want to be. Otherwise, we're gonna delay and delay and delay.
Or how many-
That's why I'm recommending in the future, start this process earlier with the finance committee. And I understand the difficulties in that, but at the same time, it's no excuse why we can't do it earlier in the year and get it taken care of. It's hard to understand and justify and answer questions not only to ourselves, but to community members. Because we represent community members just like yourselves, and, you know, I get all of that whole picture. It's just very hard, and I don't want to short-sight anybody with one question may change the way they feel about it.
For me, it's a challenge because we are the ones hired to do this for this community. We're the experts
Yeah.
at this, and it's no offense to you guys.
No.
I feel like you're put in a spot where you're the middleman.
Yeah, we absolutely are.
To try to become experts in a short window.
And that's never gonna happen.
It's never gonna happen, it's
Never.
unfair to you. I just feel like, you know, I don't know, I just feel like we're giving you a really, really good budget. And we built three, for community, and this is the best one, because it's the only one where we're not asking for a mill increase.
Right,
I don't know,
which is great.
yeah.
Are we doing now, Chris, like, I mean, my concern is where I see three of you guys sitting there tonight, where we let you choose the date, and because you're gonna have to go through everything that Lucy said tonight to your other members, like, it's just so hard to get the whole committee together.
I have one member that's zoomed in, I don't know if he's not able to communicate or what, so, and the rest of us are here, minus one.
So you're just short one?
We're short one.
Oh, you're just short one.
Yeah, so, and I wasn't the only one to choose the date, okay? I was given the selection of dates, and I chose the last opportunity that was provided to me. So I didn't choose the date on my own.
But there was a whole listing of dates, like,
That is correct, and just like you guys have difficulties in assembling and getting everybody together, it's the same for me. Okay, we all work different schedules in different places.
so, and I'm saying that for you, Chris, because you're gonna have to try to repeat everything that Lucy said to the other members.
No, I'm not gonna try to repeat anything. No, I'm not. I have my own process, and you guys have your process, and I'm just gonna make sure that I do diligence on my end. So I apologize that it creates an inconvenience on your part, but I'm not going to short-sight my part.
We have the meeting on the 18th.
You should have a decision very quickly there. I will do everything in my power to not create a difficulty in this, trust me, that's not what the goal is at all.
Do we need, school administration present when the finance committee votes on approval or disapproval of the school budget? Are you asking for school administration for another meeting with them, or do you feel like after the 18th, you've had time, I'll say we, some on the finance committee too. As a finance committee, from hearing this presentation, having time to digest, maybe.
I think that's exactly what I'm saying. I think we need some time to digest and let's think about what we're understanding here. Look at this information, go back, I wanna have one last discussion with our committee, and we'll make that decision at that time.
Do we foresee needing to have the school committee or school administration again?
I don't
Or do you
see
think we can
why.
do that remotely if there are any questions that come up that?
I would suspect that if there was something at that meeting that I had or that we had, we could easily do through email communication on the group and get those questions answered. If that,
Does that help then?
there may be no questions at all, but as the chair on the finance committee, I have a due diligence to do my part as well. I'm going to do that.
No,
So,
and I'm not taking that.
and I just want to ensure that you don't think that I'm going to stall this in any way. That's not my plan. I just want to regroup as a finance committee, because I don't have everybody sitting here in front of me, that's all.
I think that's fair. I think your style is the town, and I apologize for not being an active part of the town, but I think we've probably had at least 4 to 5 meetings with the town,
Oh, easily,
if not 6.
if not 6 or more, yeah, there was several.
So I guess.
And granted, their budgets are much easier to understand.
Yeah. And again, I was just gonna say that, I'm glad you said it, not me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, no disrespect to the town budget, but, you know, it's almost like going forward, you can't take that back, but going forward, I just flip flop those resources and spend more time on this budget versus.
Yeah, and that's why I'm suggesting going forward, I mean, because chances are I won't be sitting in this position next year, so
The pay's not that good.
it's really not.
Right, there's a thing.
It's really not. I just want to do diligence while I'm sitting in this position. I want to make sure that I've got everybody with the information they need before we make that final decision. That's all it is. And I have everybody confidence we can do that on the 18th. I really do.
We've already set up our budget workshops for next year. Do you want me to forward this to you or to Gary, or,
You could do both if that would work.
you know, they're already set up, so we already know.
Ahead of time would be excellent.
So I'll do that.
We only have one monthly budget, right? To work on the.
Yeah.
For that one, yeah.
Yeah, we can.
So that throws us off pretty good there in May, like you said, then last time, last April, when you said that you gave us the date. Well, that's frank and winter opportunity for us to do a lot of, because the first time you showed me this budget here was not the meeting before, the number 1 meeting, we never got a budget, so we didn't know what was going on, number 1. Then the second and third budget, we got information, but at the table that night, so we didn't have a chance to review any of the budget line items. Then when you ask questions, I'm blindsided, because then I'm asking a question that maybe if I would have looked at the budget a little better, and then I could have called and asked a question to the office, they would have given the answer before I came to the floor.
Precisely why I want to group one more time. To make sure that we've got our answers that we need.
And I know Gazelle, she works 24/7 in the office, so I commend her for that.
They all do,
Well, I don't see the other two, so
but I'm telling you, they
I'm
do.
sorry, yeah.
This
I
one,
understand that.
listen, this one will send me texts at 5 AM on a Sunday morning, because she's got a budget question.
Yeah.
And that one is on all the time, excuse me. They do,
No, I just see what I see.
thank you.
If I go to Fort Kent, then I'd probably see the other two at work too, but, a little ride there for out here. But anyway, I don't have any more questions.
I do have an appreciation for the work that goes into it. I do have an appreciation for doing everything you can to maintain what the budget is, or an attempt to reduce it, or whatever that may be. And I apologize for my lack of knowledge and understanding of complicated budget,
We learn every day.
you know, this is not easy, it's not easy. We are the middlemen, really, and I don't know.
Serving in that capacity.
Yeah, so I do respect everything that goes in this, I really do. So thank you for that.
And I think the school committee historically has tried to make sure that they respect the finance committee being the middleman and still giving the time and the space to make sure that they didn't feel rushed into.
It's a challenge.
I guess like here was a crunch time. So, but I think it sounds like there's some future planning that we'll keep in mind. And some opportunity to kind of do this remotely. And
get to the point where finance do their job respectfully and to provoke to a comfortable life.
Thank you. Can we adjourn?
I need a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
All those in favor? Thank you. I will follow up with you on the evening of the 18th by email immediately after our adjournment.
Perfect. And I'm sending these dates to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
No, and I was just looking at the law, I think they need 7 days. We're still just looking at it. No, it's hard to be married to somebody. When did he say his name?
So are we ready to move on to items of old business? I'm tired. I can make a motion, right?
I'm gonna try to get through, this as quickly as possible. Just wanted to give you an update on Novell Energy Solutions. You guys asked me to kind of dig a little bit more with other projects, and I was given, a contact at Versant Power, and basically they gave me an online address where I clicked on it, and there are literally 500 solar power projects in Maine. And when you look at these projects, it does not tell, so these are down on the screen. It doesn't tell where they're located or which sector of the grid is served. So I would literally have to contact each one. So I'm not gonna do that, but I did talk with Kevin LeBlanc, who was able to give me 2 companies that had reached out to him, competitors with Novell. So I will reach out to those 2 companies and kind of see what their offer is. In the meantime, I did want to tell you that I was able to reduce the commitment to 5 years. If you were interested, they would let us commit to 5 years and then roll over to another 5 years if we were to go that direction. And also, SAB 33 has decided to go with Novell with a 5-year agreement. 27 is unsure. They'd like a little bit more information as well. I just wanted to share that with you. Again, I'm not looking for you to make a decision tonight, but I wanted you to have that information.
So Kevin's, 2 competitors then?
Yeah.
Is that something that 33 looked at, or was that for the tech center?
Kevin did a little presentation to 33 because he had spoke with Connor, who was the contact, and basically Kevin was able to use the competitors to drive up Novell's offer. So he kind of played the other 2 to bring this one up, and felt that Novell had the best between the 3. It was a 15% deal for all 3, but what this entity added in was they're actually going to be donating some solar panels to the tech center, their electric program, and the students will be able to train on some panels. And they're actually going to be fully functioning panels that will add to the power of the school.
Then you mentioned two others that Kevin was looking at, but somebody had mentioned, I think it was the last meeting, is there somebody building a solar farm in Madawaska?
I wasn't able to find that. I went through the list. They're not an approved entity on the list, so they must be on a pending list. And this is what our attorney had warned about, that a lot of these companies on a pending list are slowly going to be cut away because there's already too many approved projects.
Okay, any more questions? Items of new business. Requirements,
We have no retirements.
resignation.
We have a resignation, but I'd like to go into executive to discuss this resignation.
So I need a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A Do I have a motion? Louis, move, do I have a second? Robert, seconds? All those in favor? So I need a motion to accept the resignation, discussed in the executive session. Do I have a motion? Robert moves, Nick seconds. All those in favor? No transfers?
No transfer.
And new hires?
You should have a letter in your packet. This one is from Mr. Anderson, and the interview committee, they are recommending Claire Nichols for the English position at Madawaska Middle High School. Claire is currently the special education English teacher at Fort Hampton High School. She's also taught English in the past at Wisdom Middle High School. Claire is 2 courses short of being certified in theater as well, and she also has her special ed certification. So English, special ed, almost theater, and I think she's got
Almost social
Almost social studies.
and GT.
And I can tell you that as her superintendent in SED 27, she's done a really good job this year. This job, this presented to be something that she's extremely interested in because it brings her back to regular ed. Not that she doesn't like special ed, but this is where she is.
Whose position is he?
This is Lisa Walsh.
I need a motion to approve Claire Nichols as the English teacher at MMHS. Robert moves, do I have a second? Louis seconds. All those in favor? Physical education health teacher?
This, again, you have another letter. This one actually fell in our lap. It was wonderful the way that it happened. The individual is relocating, or not relocating, locating to the area, I think the Fort Kent area, and had reached out to SED 27 Central Office to find out if our physical education athletic director position had been filled, and it had been. And so the secretary there mentioned to me that this individual had called, and I said, please have him call Wayne Anderson. So he did. Wayne and Matt spoke and exchanged some emails, and then they did a Zoom interview, and the committee highly recommends Matt McFarland for the 712 physical education health position. Matt's also very interested in someday serving as the athletic director if he affords him a chance to do that.
Do I have a motion to approve Matt McFarland as the phys ed health teacher at MMHS? Mindy moves, do I have a second? Nick seconds, all those in favor? Our Madawaska Elementary School Secretary?
Leaves, and her team wrapped up their interviews today, am I right about these today? And they did interview 3 candidates. In the end, the recommendation is for Tracy Morin. Tracy has completed 1 year of college at the University of Fort Kent. She worked as a record completion analyst at Northern Maine Medical Center, an activity aide, administrative assistant at Forest Hill Nursing Home, and a receptionist for the construction company, Tracy, Lise has not finished vetting the references. So if you were to approve this tonight, I would add to approve pending reference checks.
Do I have a motion to move?
Yes.
Robert moves. Do I have a second? Nick? All those in favor?
The other one is the adjustment. You have a request to rescind a resignation. This is a formal request to rescind my letter of resignation, which I submitted on March 19th, 2021. Since I gave my notice, many of the circumstances that influenced my decision to walk away from my teaching career have changed. For that reason, I would like to stay where I truly belong in my classroom, where I can continue to have a positive impact on the educational success of my students, and where I am afforded the opportunity to make a difference in their lives. And that's from Amy Holberg. I did speak with Amy this afternoon and kind of said, we need some stability, and she understands that. We've made some plans for changes next year with a couple of programming things in the district that are going to be changing that were part of the reason that that we believe Amy had decided to leave. One of those being our Empower program that we're moving away from and going back to Power School, and then another is working with tailoring the grading system to fit both systems in unison so that we can communicate proficiency scores with traditional Carnegie-based scores, which will be presented to you guys as we finalize our plans. But because Amy did learn about these plans for change for next fall, she's decided to stay where she loves to be.
Do I have a motion?
Can the motion read to rescind the resignation and rehire? So it's two names.
I'll decide how to say all that.
So moved, Robert. And do I have a second? Nick? All those in favor? And then we move to our current openings, a special ed teacher and long-term
So
sub.
there is no more special ed teacher.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so we're just looking for long-term sub.
In the food service.
Yeah, actually many. Any
Several.
subs? Any subs?
Anybody want to? I know. The MMHS math interventionist.
So as part of our requirement to use 20% of our ESSER 3 funds, which haven't been released yet, and all of those things, we're trying to plan ahead on the ways that we will be addressing those learning gaps. And speaking with Mr. Anderson, one of the bigger needs here at MMHS would be for a math interventionist. We're not looking for a teacher level, we're looking for an ed tech 3 level math interventionist to take essentially what the student is working on in their classroom, and then try to build capacity to improve in those things throughout the school day. We have the after school stuff, we have the summer school stuff, but we need some intervention throughout the day that we can sprinkle in there. So I'm asking that this committee consider allowing us to search for a math interventionist, and this would be funded under this. Yes.
Robert moves. Do I have a second? Mindy? Any discussion? Louis?
So is that gonna be one of those, this is COVID related? So is there a way to put something in writing so that we don't absorb this continuing after COVID is done?
Yeah, so this is, again, this will be a year-by-year position. Right. So we're not making anyone promises that you're here for the long haul.
No, and I get it, it's just one of those things, you lose sight of why is this happening? Why did it happen?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, our budget is inflated so much, and now it's all on the taxpayers
Right.
and not by grant money. So we need to find a way to put an earmark or some sort of
Code that in here.
It's coded only to,
Okay.
yeah, it has its own budget line.
Any other questions? I have a motion by Robert, second by Mindy. All those in favor? So we will move into executive session. I need a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the employment of employees pursuant to 1 MRSA 40568. And Robert just said on his way out that he moves. Do I have a second? Louis? All those in favor? 7:45. No, we're not there yet, we stay on. Motion, yes, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the nominations for the first year probationary teachers?
Yes.
Robert moves, do I have a second? Nick? All those in favor? Do I have a motion to approve the nominations for second or third year probationary teachers? Robert moves, do I have a second? Nick? All those in favor? Do I have a nomination for the continuing contracts and other district professionals? Robert moves, do I have a second? Nick? All those in favor? Okay, do I have a nomination to approve the extension of administrator contracts as recommended by the superintendent? Do I have a motion? Nick motions, do I have a second?
Yes.
Mindy? All those in favor? Louis, do I have a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? Nick? All those in favor?
Louis and Louis.
Yeah,
I don't know who is the second.
yeah. Yeah.